Summer, 1943. Stalag Luft III. A soccer player launches the ball, and it sails toward the perimeter fence of a German prisoner of war camp built to be escape-proof. In the guard tower, a soldier with a rifle watches the ball bounce near the wire. He's seen this before. Every match, the same clumsy footballer kicks the ball wide, jogs over to retrieve it, and comes back. But today the man is not jogging. He is sprinting, full speed across the exercise yard, past the warning wire, the low tripwire that marks the boundary where guards have standing orders to shoot, and straight at 9 feet of barbed wire. Behind him, the soccer match freezes. In the tower, the guard's brain processes what it has been trained to expect. A prisoner fetching his ball. The pattern is familiar. The speed is not. By the time recognition catches up to reality, by the time the guard's hands find the rifle, the prisoner has reached the fence. He hits the wire at a dead run, grabs a post, and hauls himself up and over the barbed wire in a desperate ripping scramble. Barbs tear cloth and skin. It doesn't matter. He drops to the other side, staggers upright, and sprints for the tree line 50 yards away. A shout from the tower, the crack of a rifle. The round hits dirt, but he is already in the pines, far away. To understand Bill Ash, we need to start in Dallas, Texas in the 1934. He grew up in the Depression, working class, scrappy, with a stubborn streak that would define everything he ever did. By the time he was 20, the world was catching fire. Hitler was swallowing Europe. Spain had fallen to Franco. Britain and France were trying appeasement and getting nowhere. The United States was neutral. And for a young Texan with strong opinions about fascism, neutrality felt like complicity. So Ash did something that most Americans in 1940 would have considered insane. He traveled north to Canada and enlisted in the Royal Canadian Air Force. Not because Canada was his country, not because anyone asked him to, because he believed that what was happening in Europe was wrong, and he couldn't sit in Texas and watch. He trained as a fighter pilot, transferred to the Royal Air Force, and by early 1942 was flying Spitfires over occupied France with the kind of aggressive conviction that gets men either decorated or killed. On March 24, 1942, over the Pas de Calais, it was the second option. Ash's Spitfire was hit during a fighter sweep. He went down in occupied territory and was captured by German soldiers before he could evade. He was 24 years old, a volunteer in someone else's Air Force, and now a prisoner of the regime he had traveled 4,000 miles to fight. Most men in that situation focus on surviving until liberation. Ash focused on getting out. From the moment the Germans put him behind wire, he started looking for the weakness. He found his first one within weeks. Then he found the next one, and the next. Over the course of the war, Bill Ash would attempt to escape 13 times. He would never once make it home, but he would never stop trying. Ash passed through the German transit system and eventually landed at Stalag Luft III, the Luftwaffe's showcase prison camp near Sagan in Lower Silesia. The camp had been purpose-built to be escape-proof. Barracks raised on stilts so guards could see underneath, seismic microphones buried in the soil to detect tunnel digging, bright yellow subsoil that betrayed any excavation the moment spoil reached the surface, double perimeter fences topped with barbed wire, guard towers at every angle, and a warning wire 30 feet inside the main fence. Cross it, and you could be shot without a word. Ash looked at all of it and started planning. His early attempts followed the standard playbook. He dug, he cut wire, he tried disguises. Each attempt taught him something about the camp's security, and each attempt ended the same way. Recapture, a stretch in the cooler, the camp's solitary confinement block, and a return to the compound with a thicker disciplinary file and a completely undiminished appetite for the next try. The Germans began to know him. The ferrets, specialist anti-escape guards who prowled the compound in blue overalls, watched him with particular attention. His reputation as a persistent nuisance preceded him through every transfer. None of it mattered. For Ash, escape was not a hobby or a fantasy. It was a vocation. He later said he wasn't very good at escaping, but he was very persistent. The self-deprecation was characteristic. Ash treated his own extraordinary stubbornness as a joke rather than a virtue. But behind the dry humor was a man who could not accept a cage, not philosophically, not practically, not ever. And somewhere around his 4th or 5th attempt, sitting in the cooler after another failure, he had an idea unlike anything he had tried before. The idea came from watching soccer. The Luftwaffe encouraged sports at Stalag Luft III: football, rugby, athletics, as a way to manage prisoner morale. Men burning energy on a soccer pitch were men less likely to burn it on escape plans. The irony would prove exquisite. The activity designed to pacify prisoners was about to become an escape tool. Matches were played on the exercise area inside the compound, close enough to the perimeter that a hard, misdirected kick could send the ball sailing toward the wire. When it did, a prisoner would walk over, retrieve it, and bring it back. Guards watched this happen, then watched it happen again, and Ash watched the guards. Here's what he noticed. The first time a ball went near the fence and a prisoner walked toward the wire, the tower guard raised his rifle. The second time, the guard watched carefully. The fifth time, the guard glanced. The 10th time, the guard barely looked up. Human beings stop paying attention to things that happen repeatedly without consequence. Ash didn't need to know the technical term for this. He just needed to use it. He started kicking the ball over the fence. Not every match, that would have been suspicious, but regularly enough that the sight of Bill Ash jogging toward the perimeter wire to retrieve a soccer ball became one of the most boring, unremarkable things a tower guard could witness during his shift. The conditioning campaign had begun. It would require weeks of patience, fine calibration, and the discipline to resist sprinting too soon. But Ash had nothing except time, and one explosive moment's worth of speed. He was saving for the day. The conditioning was complete. Day after day, match after match, the pattern held. Ash would boot the ball wide, trot casually toward the wire, pick it up, and walk back to the game. Sometimes another player retrieved it instead. Sometimes the ball landed short and nobody went near the fence at all. The variation was deliberate. A perfectly consistent pattern would have raised flags. Ash was running an experiment in human attention, and the variables had to feel natural. The guards rotated shifts, which meant Ash was conditioning not just one soldier, but the entire tower crew's collective expectation. The message they absorbed, shift after shift, was simple. Prisoners chase soccer balls near the fence. It means nothing. Each retrieval was a test. Each casual jog to the wire was another data point. Ash was measuring something he couldn't quantify with precision, the exact moment when a guard's trained alertness decayed into trained indifference. He watched their body language from across the pitch, the way a guard leaned forward the first week, leaned back by the second, barely turned his head by the third. And all the while, Ash was measuring something else. Distances, the sprint from the pitch to the fence, the gap between the warning wire and the main perimeter, the distance from the outer fence to the tree line beyond. He knew how many seconds the run would take at full speed. What he couldn't know, what no amount of conditioning could guarantee, was whether 2 seconds of hesitation would be enough. Because that's what the entire plan came down to. Weeks of patient, meticulous manipulation. Dozens of casual ball retrievals, all designed to purchase a single commodity. A delay between the moment the guard saw him running and the moment the guard understood what the running meant. 2 seconds. That was the window. There was a problem Ash couldn't condition his way past. The fence itself. 9 feet of barbed wire, strung between wooden posts, with a second fence beyond it, and concertina wire in the gap between. A man could climb it, but climbing takes time. And time was exactly what the guard's hesitation was supposed to buy. Every second Ash spent tangled in wire was a second the tower guard had to aim. The plan demanded speed, hit the fence with enough momentum to get over it before the hesitation expired. That meant no careful climbing, no wire cutters, no pre-cut section prepared by accomplices the night before. Just a man at full sprint hitting barbed wire and getting through it on velocity and adrenaline and the willingness to bleed. The barbs would tear him apart. He knew that. He also knew that torn skin heals, and a rifle round doesn't. There was another complication. What happened after the fence? The Great Escape, the mass tunnel breakout that would happen at the same camp 9 months later, would send men out with forged documents, civilian clothes, and planned routes to neutral territory. Ash would have none of that. The soccer escape was a physical breakout, not an intelligence operation. Once he cleared the tree line, he'd be a bleeding man in a shredded uniform with no papers, no money, no contacts, and no German. Lower Silesia was deep inside the Reich, hundreds of miles from any neutral border. The escape plan got him over the fence. Everything after that was improvisation. Ash weighed the odds. 5 minutes of freedom was worth it. 5 days, if he was lucky, was a fortune. He picked his match. The game began like every other game. men in combinations of uniform trousers and undershirts, kicking a ball across a packed dirt pitch on a warm afternoon in Lower Silesia. The guard tower cast a long shadow across the near touchline. The soldier on duty leaned against the railing with his rifle slung, watching without interest. He had seen 100 of these matches. Ash played, he ran, he passed, he positioned himself on the side of the pitch nearest the fence, the way he always did, because he was the clumsy one who always kicked the ball wide. The other players knew what was coming. Not all of them, but enough. The men on that pitch understood that today's match was not a match. They played louder, more animated than usual, creating noise and movement to hold the guards' peripheral attention on the game, not on the edge of the field. Ash waited for the right moment. The ball came to him near the touchline. He didn't rush it. He let the play develop, let the guard settle into the familiar rhythm of watching bodies run and a ball bounce back and forth across dirt. He had done this dozens of times. The guard had watched him do it dozens of times. The neural pathway was worn smooth. Ash near the ball near the fence. Nothing to worry about. Ash controlled the ball at his feet, looked up once at the fence, and kicked it hard and high toward the perimeter. It sailed over the warning wire and bounced near the base of the main fence. The guard in the tower glanced down, the American going to get his ball again. Ash took his first step, then his second, and then he was running, not jogging, not trotting, sprinting, flat out, legs driving, arms pumping, every fiber of a lean, underfed body committed to maximum acceleration across open ground. The warning wire flashed under his feet. The fence filled his vision, barbed wire, wooden posts, barbs catching afternoon sunlight. Behind him, the soccer match erupted in deliberate chaos, players shouting and colliding to hold the guard's eye. 1 more second, 2 more seconds. In the tower, the guard saw the movement, and his brain did what Ash had spent weeks training it to do. It recognized the pattern. Prisoner, ball, fence, normal. But the speed was wrong. The trajectory was wrong. Everything was wrong. The guard straightened, his hands moved toward the rifle. The recognition formed, but the processing had taken seconds, 2, maybe 3. And in those seconds, Ash had crossed the distance from the pitch to the fence at a dead sprint. He hit the wire without slowing down, hands on the top of the post, barbed wire biting through cloth and into palms, momentum carrying his body upward. He scrambled, tore, hauled himself over the top in a convulsion of adrenaline and ripping fabric, barbs opening gashes across his forearms and chest and thighs. He cleared the wire and dropped hard to the other side. The ground slammed into him. He was up, running, the rifle cracked behind him. The round snapped through branches to his left. A second shot, wide. Ash crashed into the tree line and kept running, weaving between pines, putting trees and distance between himself and the fence. Behind him, the alarm siren began its wail across the compound. In front of him, for the first time in over a year, there was no wire, no tower, no fence. Bill Ash was out. He ran until the camp sounds faded behind him. Then he slowed to a walk. He was bleeding from a dozen barbed wire gashes, wearing a shredded uniform that marked him as an escaped enemy prisoner, carrying no food, no water, no documents, and no map. He was somewhere in the pine forests of Lower Silesia, deep inside Germany, with the nearest neutral border hundreds of miles to the southwest. He had no plan for this part. He had planned the conditioning, the sprint, the fence. Everything beyond the tree line was instinct and stubbornness. He traveled at night and hid during the day, moving through forest and across open farmland, drinking from streams, eating what he could forage. 5 days. For 5 days, Bill Ash moved through occupied Europe as a free man. He slept under hedges, ducked patrols, avoided roads and villages where his face and his accent would betray him in seconds. It couldn't last. An American with no German, no papers, and a torn uniform does not walk across the Reich unnoticed. German authorities picked him up on the 5th day. He was returned to camp, thrown in the cooler. Solitary confinement, reduced rations, the standard punishment for a man who had committed the non-crime of trying to be free. Ash sat in the dark and did what he always did after a failed escape. He started thinking about the next one. The soccer method had worked, the conditioning, the sprint, the fence crossing. What had failed was the evasion. Next time, he would need documents, a route, contacts. Next time. There was always a next time with Bill Ash. The cooler door would open and he'd walk back into the compound. And before the week was out, he'd be studying the fences again. Over the remaining years of the war, he kept at it. Tunnels, disguises, deceptions he would detail decades later with the wry amusement of a man who found his own failures genuinely entertaining. 13 escape attempts in total across his years as a prisoner, 13 recaptures, 0 home runs. He never reached Switzerland, never reached Sweden, never once made it to Allied lines. Every plan, including the most audacious soccer game fence escape in the history of prisoner of war camps, ended the same way: caught, cooler, start again. When liberation finally came in 1945, it arrived not through a tunnel Ash had dug or a fence he had scaled, but through the advancing Allied armies rolling across Germany. The man who spent the entire war trying to break out was freed by someone else breaking in. After the war, Ash settled in Britain and became a citizen of the country he had volunteered to defend before his own had entered the fight. He built a career as a writer and broadcaster at the BBC. He was appointed MBE for his wartime service. In 2005, at 87 years old, he published his memoir, Under the Wire. 6 decades of stories finally set down by a man who had been telling them in pubs and living rooms his whole life. He died in London on April 26, 2014, at 96. His obituaries called him the great escaper who never escaped. The phrase captures something true about what makes his story last. 13 times, Bill Ash looked at a cage built to hold him and decided it couldn't. 13 times, the cage proved him wrong. He never adjusted the conclusion. He never accepted the result. He just tried again with a new plan and the same unbreakable conviction that no fence, not barbed wire, not armed guards, not the entire machinery of the Third Reich, had the right to tell him where he could and couldn't go. Most escape stories are about the men who made it. This one is about a man who never did, and who never once considered stopping.